just remember, he is with you. Just before we do the Bible reading, I did forget to mention this book. Malcolm asked me to just mention this morning. So some of you might recall that this is the compilation that was put together as part of John's gift, his farewell gift. It's a reflection of, it's a photographic reflection of all of the times that John has shared with us during his term here between 2017 and 2022. It's a beautiful book, I've got to say. It's magnificent. It's available for sale for anyone who would want one for as a permanent record. They're $36. Now the bad news is that it's been so popular we'll have to do a new print run. Right? It's been sold out, which is not quite true, but if you would like one, please see Malcolm and he will gladly take your order. $36, and based on what I've just seen, I would recommend it. I'm certainly going to get one. It's a great memento. We're reading this morning from the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, commencing at chapter 7 and verse 13. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it. Beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are like ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? So every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, you will know them by their fruits. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house. And yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. When Jesus had finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teaching. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks, Jim.
Is that not good for the camera, Merv? Is that okay? Oh, good. Oh, that's soon. All right. This is going to flip back, isn't it? And throw my laptop on the ground. That'll be fun, won't it? Lovely to see everyone today. I haven't been around much in January. I have to say I've been spending a lot of time with a bunch of young people at our place, and it's been really lovely, but it hasn't given me much flexibility in my schedule. Jack Jenkins actually is with them at the moment, so I could be here now, and then another volunteer so I can go and help my mum, the Savo. That's been January, and that's okay. It's much better than having COVID, I've discovered. That was the end of December. So it's really nice to be here. And Mark, thank you for putting so much work into pulling this together. You can really see it, and it's lovely, and I feel valued. I don't know about the rest of you, but you can see that he's really considered us and also considered the climate we're in. And I just want to add to your Jan 26, and I won't, push it as I tend to with Aboriginal issues. But my good friend Brooke Prentice, Waka Waka Woman, Christian leader, is hosting something that you will, Glenda, bless her, shot out this morning. That was quick. I sent it to you and then you circulated that so quickly. On Wednesday, the day before, on the 25th, and 7:30, and you can just follow the link and watch it. And it's a Christian reflective service, if you like, about this time of year, led by Aboriginal people. Auntie Jean Phillips will be part of that, and she is the senior most Aboriginal Christian woman in Australia, and Aboriginal cultural, what we call cultural protocols. You must listen to your elders. And I think we've learnt a little bit of that, but nothing like our mates, our Aboriginal mates. So yeah, jump on that. And also Willa Moraine is hosting a, I'm not sure if they're calling it Survival Day, a gig down there, and I'll be taking some Aboriginal kids down there, and they have a smoking ceremony and a few other things. It's a nice vibe, just down in Hastings, not far. So get online and you can become a non-Aboriginal member of Willa Moraine too. That's really good to do. So then I'll get off my soapbox and I'll move on, but thank you. I've been reflecting recently because I read this book. Do people have January reading? Is the sound okay, Karen? Do you want me to move to something else? Hair. I'll put it on the bolder side. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Marcus. Ha ha ha. I can't stop that. Oh, look. All right. We'll see how we go. I don't mind. If you want me to move to something else, tell me. I haven't got anywhere else it's going there. Okay, so do people do January reading? Like, this is what I'm going to read in January. Some people do. I read all the time, but something about January tells me I need different books. They're never different. They're just books. I fully recommend this one. This is Diana Butler Bass, and it's a new release. It's called Freeing Jesus, and fantastic. Very easy to read. I tend to drift to a kind of dense, kind of theological book. This has got all of the richness of a dense theology book, but through stories. If you think that you aren't a reader, this could cure you of that affliction. And this one, Not Without My Neighbour, who is that 20 years old actually? Yeah, I've been demoted to handhelds. Thank you. Sorry. I just couldn't do it with the special one. So Not Without My Neighbour, and this is about 20 years old. It's by a Sri Lankan fella, published by the World Council of Churches, talks a lot about what it means to live in a pluralistic society as a Jesus follower. Fantastic. Tackles those hairy questions that always come up when we talk about matters of, I would say, living with people that are not exactly the same as us. Because, gee, we run into some dilemmas, don't we? And particularly the Diana Butler Bass book had me reflecting on my experience, because of all her stories, my experience growing up. And I really haven't thought about this much, so this is quite fresh for me. But some of you might know I grew up in a housing commission area in South Australia called Elizabeth. Anyone heard of that? Yeah. Gives you a whole... And Jimmy Barnes, yeah. So now you've got a whole array of judgments for me. And yeah, they're all true. And because of the kind of area it was, it attracted missionary types, you know? Funny. And I don't know, they were concerned about our eternal souls or something similar. There was a bunch of them that really did not gain a lot of respect by local people, yeah? You'd get a toastie and a pencil with Jesus on it, and I don't know. We just avoided them. It was a bit weird. Whereas there was actually a convent across the road from where I lived, next to the primary school, full of nuns. And it had no windows. It was like a square box. And as kids, you know, you'd ride your bikes around it and make up all sorts of spooky stories that were not true. That was funny. This is all coming back to me. So anyway, the reality of it was I actually went to the primary school. It was a private Catholic school, but it was pittance to send your kids there. And there was also they were the Sisters of Mercy, and there was also a drop-in there was a centre that had a drop-in down the road. And around from 4:30 to, I don't know, when the parents would come and drag us away, or we'd have to ride our bikes home, because most parents didn't really give us stuff where you were, they would play with us, feed us, do some teaching, skipping rope, all that stuff. And these were rough, barefoot, swearing street kids, you know? And there were hundreds at this centre. I can remember this big hall, and they do a craft with you. And, you know, you couldn't find your friend because there were so many people in there, kids in there making, you know, hammering wood together or doing whatever, up to mischief. So it was quite amazing. And those women, those nuns, had people's respect because they were there. And look, we all know, I can tell you some stories about the ones that we had problems with, because there's some folks and teachers, you teachers would know that, I think they've had enough of the antics of children after a while. And different behaviour comes out. And then the scary nuns. There was one we used to call Skeletor. She was terrifying. Actually, she was quite nice, but I think we just were nasty, basically. So anyway, the why I tell this story was within the school and within this drop-in centre, there was faith-based teaching. So we would have religion classes a couple of times a week at school, and then we would have a little sit down and a talk after we've had something to eat at this drop-in centre, this chaos centre. And most of the time I probably was picking at the carpet or not listening because I didn't do well in school. I don't sit still now, let alone when I was like 7 and 10 or whatever. So picking at the carpet, and the stories you heard, the focus of the teaching, let me say it like this, was never about, I never remember hearing about sin. I never remembered hearing about concepts of atonement. I never remembered hearing about who's in and who's out, and a special prayer that you had to pray to be that person. What I remember repeatedly talked about was about the quality of true friendship. What a good friend was like, about being trustworthy, kind, caring, honest, and the quality of how you lived with each other. And this was, looking back with my theological training now, that is nonsense, really, and I think these women had the right idea. It was a posture of simplicity that anyone can grasp hold of, anyone, yeah? Whereas where the focus of the teaching was friendship, it was also how Jesus was shared. Because Jesus, we were told, was one of the dear friends. We should just move on now and just go and have a cup of tea, because that's it. Hey, the funny thing is, like when you start looking, those of us that have done social studies and psychology, or read a bunch of books about this sort of thing, on poor communities, and this is a worldwide understanding, there is an overarching value that is present in these kinds of communities across the board, and this is loyalty. And I have to say, through education, career choices, and my place in the community now, I recognise I've moved away from those roots of social disadvantage, despite the fact I still live in a refuge. I'm full of it, aren't I? Anyway, I think I've moved away from it. But I think, though, the roots of what it makes to be a good neighbour has stayed with me. And I reckon those nuns knew something. And as I think about it, I'm going off tangents. It's always dangerous. When you read studies on the first century Palestine peasant communities, that's also what comes up. These folks knew. You knew you had to stick together to look after your neighbour. And you see it in times of crisis, in wars, you hear it through Viktor Frankl's works on Auschwitz, during the floods, fires, housing crisis here, the beautiful things that are popping up because people come together in hardship. Well, when you grow up in poverty and disadvantage, you learn that's in your skin. You know it. And it's a beautiful thing. Sad, isn't it, that we have to suffer to be a good friend? Anyway, as I learnt the power of friendship from these nuns and my community, the image of Jesus as friend did take root. And as a child, Jesus was a God as friend. And I have to tell you, I struggled with the Easter story because that was my friend. And could it have been different? And I did not, and I still, this is one of those complex theological discussions that I have talks with lecturers about. Did it need to happen? Who crucified Jesus? Was it God? Was it empire? All those sorts of things that come up for me. Anyway, that's another discussion. Friendship, I suggest, is a way of viewing the love of neighbour that cuts through our adult nonsense. Yeah? And hold that thought, adult nonsense, because we have a bit of it, unfortunately. Through these cool books, one of the things Butler Bass talks about to her readers is the Quaker understanding of friendship. Anyone had much to do with Quakers? Couple? I got to tell you, I'm down now. I've found a mob in Cradle Mountain. They have retreats. I think I might go down and see what they have to say for themselves. Anyway, the original Quaker members simply addressed each other as friend. There was no leadership hierarchy of sorts. Everyone was just friend, and if you were part of the community, you were simply friend despite being a woman, a peasant, and someone of financial means, etc., etc. All people, even outside of the Quaker community, were viewed as holding the light. Every person on earth holding the light. That's Imago Dei, or Latin for image of God, an understanding of that. Okay, so beautiful. You are the image of God. You are the image of God. That fella there, image of God, holds the light. How special is that? It's just so special. The pushback came when the Quakers addressed people. Nah, go for it. I need to go to the bathroom too, actually. I drank too much tea. In the old days of thou and thee, such terms were the way you addressed folks. Does that make sense? So when a Quaker walked down the road in England and crossed paths with a local squire and addressed his higher-ranking neighbour as thou, instead of the more formal expected you, it was akin to calling a member of the nobility mate. Yeah? See why they run into trouble? Obviously, nobility don't take too kindly to that kind of thing. So such practices of friendship were based on the belief that since we are friends of God, we are all friends of one another. And it was considered as well by the church heretical. And because it threatened the stability of society. Quakers were sent to prison and exiled for the crime of being friends. I think you've got to be a little bit heretical sometimes. Keeps you in line. They were part of the abolition of slavery and of women's rights. To people who see everyone as friend, it is pretty dang obvious that your friend should not be held in slavery. Of course. Does that change your understanding of love thy neighbour? I reckon it cracks the code. For me it does. I'm down with this. He, she, they are your friend, and what a treasure a friend is. And friendship with God meant a more just, loving and egalitarian society. Friendship was for the good of the world. Isn't it easy to respect your friend? Because you've listened to them. You've understood what life is like for them. You empathise with them even when they're different from you. If we are all friends and live as such, what might the fruits be of that? Thus, you will know them by their fruits. The challenge is, Matthew describes those of us who will cry out, and we do, Lord, Lord, but we did all this impressive stuff in power. Aren't you impressed with us? Surely our fancy words earn us a grand place in your kingdom. Matthew repeats this theme in chapter 25. Then they will say, Lord, Lord, when did we see you hungry, thirsty, naked, homeless, in prison? And I tell you the truth, is the reply. Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. If you read this passage, be shocked. Those who care for the suffering neighbour are those who enter God's kingdom. We don't hear that a lot, do we? The Western church struggles with these concepts. Salvation in the gospel, in the Bible, there's no mention of a sinner's prayer. St. Anthony, I think one of my favourite quotes from last year that I stumbled across, your life, he says, your life and death belongs to your neighbour. Scandalise your brother and you scandalise Christ. Let me say that again. Your life and death belongs to your neighbour. You belong. There's part of you that is within them and they are within you. Scandalise your brother and you scandalise Christ, because Christ too is with us and with your neighbour. There is a oneness. And of course there is. What kind of kingdom, or I prefer the term basileia, would it be if we let our neighbours suffer or excluded them or judged them or took no notice of their plight? The kingdom is now. So you feed, clothe, house, spend time with your neighbour like they are your friend, not a project. You walk in the kingdom now. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is a present tense. What a beautiful place to be. The problem we face, I believe, as adults and as the church, sadly, is adults have agendas. Yeah? We do, don't we? We don't like to admit it, but we do. And sadly, the church has often had an agenda too. Maybe we seek to connect with people because it's part of a program, or maybe we seek to build the church, bums on seats, raise the offering, to feel good that we did our duty, to demonstrate how good our goodness. And I have to say, I'm no different. I've led Fusion for many years now, and I actually struggle to think of one friend I have that I have not got to donate money or volunteer in some way. Shame on me. I sometimes meet people outside of Fusion just so I can stay sane, and outside of the peninsula, so I knock about at some unis and some other places. And I meet people, and we'll go to like blues bands recently, going to see blues bands. And I think to myself, don't recruit them, just have a friend. It never lasts. And look, and these aren't bad things, are they? Those nuns, they were running programs. There was great fruit that came from that. But it's something to be mindful of, because we drift into seeing people as projects, not as people, not as friend. For me, it's important to consider the example that Matthew gives us in chapter 18. You will only enter the kingdom of God if you come like a child. Children just play with another child because they're in front of them, don't they? What agenda is there? I'm bored, let's play. It's great. And in ancient times, friendship was 100% what you could do for someone else to advance self. It was the social system. But what if you just loved someone because they were there, like a child? You find joy with them because they are. What if you just made friends because we're made to be friends? That we loved our neighbour, warts and all, whoever they are, whatever they're like, even if they will never pray a sinner's prayer and we will never ask them to. Maybe that's going too far. Maybe I'm getting too comfortable with you, my friends, and we can have a conversation over a cuppa instead. Okay, how about this? Everyone who hears such words and puts them into practice is like someone who builds their house upon stable ground. Those monsoon rains are happening in Victoria because of freaky weather conditions and climate change, but you know what? That house stands firm. Yet, everyone who hears these words and goes about with their own agenda is like someone who builds their house upon a sandy beach. It looks pretty flashy on the beach, but with global warming, that house is getting washed away. What is the stable ground according to Matthew's Gospel? Yeah? But I tell you, we can use that word like an idol. Those first fleet people that came with their Bibles thought they knew God. Where was the fruit in their actions? Did the convicts know their fruit? Did the Aboriginal peoples that were slaughtered by the thousands see those fruit? I tell you, the love. Where's our mate Adrian? What is that passage you shared with me this morning? God is love. Those that do not love do not know God. And that's from, one of Peter's letters. Love of neighbour is the kind of love that is a true friend. The late Athol Gill, Melbourne theologian, reminds us more than any other gospel. Matthew asserts that love of God must continually be accompanied by a corresponding love of one's neighbour. Your life and death belong to your neighbour. St. Teresa of Avila says, God has no hands but yours. Yours are the hands with which he blesses the world. You, with the light. It's nice to hear because I can do simple things with my hands. I can make a cuppa for someone I listen to. I can ease myself into a comfy chair next to someone who's sitting alone. What can you do with yours? Last night, Saturday night at an accommodation service with young people, you don't get to bed very early. Anyway, they were all out having some shenanigans. I had dinner down at Main Street with another two of them. They wanted to hang out with me. That was nice. But then around 9:30, one of the lads came home and he was up in his room for a while. At 9:30, I'm sitting in the lounge room having a read and I hear running with bare feet. It's different than shoes. Running down the stairs. And this kid runs into the lounge room and he's a rough sort. He's been in and out of refuges his whole life and foster care systems. He's got tattoos all along his neck, gets into fights at Frankston Station, swears like a trooper. He got a picture. Oh, don't tut, he's beautiful. And he bursts in. Guess what? I said, what? If you mix milk with Powerade, it tastes like strawberry milk. I was like, whoa, that's cool. He goes, I know, I just saw it in a video, but it has to be blue. Has to be blue. I had to tell you that. He had to tell me why. Because friendship has grown. And guess what I'm buying this afternoon? And I have to tell you, I hate drinking milk. But, the things you do for friends. And that interaction is probably the most gospel thing of my week. We're going to move to a time of communion. And as we recall the Eucharist, our friend Jesus shared a meal with those he called friends. And of course, this included folks who betrayed him. And so often we think of friend Judas. Though church, it was Peter too who betrayed Jesus. In fact, 3 times. Yet one man retreated to the upper room with friends and the other alone. And now tradition only recalls one as betrayer. Is that a tragedy? Reach out to your friends, your neighbours. Before we come up to share in this meal, I have a little poem for you by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who speaks of friendship. No one has planted, no one watered it. It grows, defenceless, in freedom and in cheerful confidence that no one will grudge it life under the broad sky. Come forward, let's share this together. The offering bag is here. I knew that. That was prophecy. The offering bag is here for those who are